Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Mira Rubin is a transformational coach, visionary, and author. She is the host of two podcasts, Sustainability Now and The Core Connection. Mira is the originator of the Core Connection process, which is a unique synthesis of and evolution of multiple modalities, including neuro-linguistic programming, hypnosis, and applied kinesiology. The Core Connection work precipitates often miraculous shifts that result in expansive new opportunities and accomplishment, and an expanded experience of freedom and an empowered stewardship of life. Well, Mira, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's a pleasure to see you again.
I am so delighted to be here with you, Tim. Thank you.
I was hoping you could start us off by letting us know a little bit about how you got into the work you do and what drives your passion for it.
I think the reason or the driving force for getting me into the work that I do is that I was searching for a way to fix myself. I felt very broken for most of my life, really. And so I was always seeking modalities, techniques, answers, solutions. And years ago, when I was about 30, well, I had prior experiences, but when I was about 30, I took training in hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming and something else called One Brain, which introduced me to emotional intelligence and muscle testing. And I've been working with that for years. Since I was a teenager, consciousness has been my most compelling curiosity. And so all of that combined, I think it really compelled my interest and a desire to find a way out of the pain that I had been experiencing for most of my life, pain and depression, emotional pain.
And so how long have you been doing the work in the format that it's currently in?
That's hard to say because it really has been an evolution. And the work has educated me. But I would say probably easily more than 5 years, but it's been more than a 30-year process.
So what's the typical clientele that you work with?
So my work is really not for people who are new to transformation. It's not for people who haven't done a lot of work already. So on the other side of that, who it is for is people who are schooled in emotional intelligence, who have typically the teachers, the healers, the therapists, the transformational people that have already had enough foundation to be accepting their responsibility for their lives, the quality of their lives, to recognize that they have the ability to shift and change things. They've moved out of victimhood into creatorship in one way or another. So those are the folks that I work with.
And I'm assuming that doesn't necessarily mean people have to be a certain age.
Not at all. Not at all. I've worked with people of all ages. From, I guess, the youngest person I worked with was maybe 10. I work with people in their 70s, all the way through 20s, 30s, 40s, the whole gamut.
So how do you introduce the type of work you do or the process you do when you're talking to someone?
So it's such a great question, because the work that I do is indescribable, really, in terms of the results. I mean, I explain it as an evolution of NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, and hypnosis. And I speak of it kind of as shamanic work, because It engages people on an other than conscious level. So it's sort of dream time kind of stuff too. But because the language is so inadequate to describe the experience that people have of radical transformation, the way that I introduce people to the work is by giving a session. So the reason for that is I've worked with people that in the beginning of a session were filled with self-hatred that they'd had throughout their lives. And at the end of a session, that self-hatred is gone. And I could tell you that, and I could tell you I've worked with people that felt suicidal and not had acted on it, but were thinking of dying a lot and having that shift. But it doesn't, as radical as that might be for the person who experiences it, my recounting of it doesn't carry the impact that experience has when it is a personal experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about it is that my experience of your work, because we did a session a couple of days ago, was that it's just a process. It's not really a technique.
I don't know the distinction. What's the distinction?
Well, it's like, I don't have to follow a format or a formula. I don't have to have a device that I learn to operate. This kind of leads into my next question for you, which is, how do you conceptualize, how do you think about what that transformational process is? What drives that? How do people get the results they get when they do the work with you?
Magic. I think, anything we don't have an adequate explanation for looks like magic, right? So I think the way that I conceptualize it, and it may or may not be true, is that the reason the process works so powerfully is because it is largely driven by my clients' other than conscious intelligence. And I believe, and it may or may not be true, but I believe that our other than conscious intelligence, and I say that rather than unconscious, because unconscious means, it has its own implications, it has all the answers that we need. And one of the things that is very prevalent or foundational to this work, so it's not a technique, but there are certain guideposts to the way that I do the work. And one of the things is non-judgment. So the way that the work is done allows us to be present to what's going on for us without judging. And I think that one of the greatest impediments to transformation in therapeutic context is a lot of self-judgment, a lot of self-analysis, a lot of cogitation that creates a resistance to just allowing what's there. So that's the foundational principle of the work, is to be present to what's there, allowing what's there, whatever it is. And then also there's a somatic component. So there's a, what does it feel like in your body? What's the emotion attendant to it? What's the visual or the conceptual piece? And bouncing back and forth between these different elements and noticing what shifts just by allowing ourselves to be present to the experience.
It's like going on the internal safari with a guide who's never been there before, but she knows not to panic.
Thank you for that. Well, speaking of knowing not to panic, I can say that I have been in sessions with, you never know where the session's going to go. And I've been in sessions with people that have had extremely intense emotional experiences on the way. And I think that one thing that I spoke earlier of the pain that I had experienced, emotional pain in my life, I think that has served me to allow me to be present with somebody in that moment of fear or panic or profound grief or whatever, and to allow that is just a moment and it is in a process of moving through. There have been one or two times that I got a little nervous about whether we were going to get to the other side of it or not, I have to say. But it's powerful, and some people experience intense emotion during the process and other people not at all, and other people go through it joyfully and still get the transformation. So
that's one of the things about when I'm working with people, and people say, well, how do you work with trauma? What's the best way to work with depression, or the best way to work with, name a label.
right.
And my usual comeback is, the best way is to remember you're not working with that, you're working with a person.
100%.
And that was my experience of doing the work with you, is that it's very much just this walk into whatever's there. And you've already mentioned the idea of observation on multiple levels and acceptance. And for a lot of people, that's a foreign concept, especially in some of the therapeutic modalities that have developed. Trying to fix, identifying something as a problem and trying to fix it was one of our big pushes for a long time in the psychotherapeutic realm. And so many people have found that has limitations, right? That labeling and then the cognitive structure around that, I can make some adjustments within that cognitive structure, but I don't realize what I'm missing outside of it, and the vast resources that each person has. And that's the kind of thing I believe you help people tap into.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think the thing that distinguishes my work from NLP or hypnosis or so many other modalities is that those are driven by the agenda of the practitioner. And in this case, I don't have an agenda. My agenda, if anything, is to be fully present to the journey that the other person is going on. And I realized that I didn't really create a context for folks to understand what this process looks like. So I just want to lay the foundation so, people maybe can follow along with us a little better. So what I do in a session is I just start out by saying, okay, what is it we're going to work on? And my initial question is, what in your way of being, if it were to change, would be life altering? And so answers to that question vary from, I wouldn't have fear, or I would feel better about myself, or I wouldn't feel like a loser, or who knows, those kinds of things. And then once we establish what we're working on or the arena that we're in, I'll say, okay, so what I set certain coordinates. This is the woo-woo piece of what I do in time and space or dimension or whatever. And I do that through muscle testing. And that's usually invisible to my client. But I think it is actually a really important factor to the work and the effectiveness of it, frankly. But anyway, then I'll say, okay, so what's the first thing that comes to mind? And I literally have done a session, as I told you, on popcorn and cotton candy, because that's the symbol that came up for this person. And we interacted with it and they had a remarkable result. I've had other clients where they had all these horribly bloody visuals, and then there would be a result. I've had other people that have had just joyful travels through the woods and into the stars. And, so the reason that it's so powerful is that whatever those symbols are, arise from the consciousness of the person that I'm working with. And so their inner map, so to speak, is making itself present in a way that doesn't have to make any sense at all, but that is untying all the strings and wires that are keeping things bundled up the way that they were, and allowing for a change in experience and conceptualization.
And when you say experience, my mind goes immediately to the physical as well as the emotional and the mental. And that's one of the things that, people ask me, what do you wish they would teach in therapy schools that they never taught you? And that would be it, that there is no separation between the physical and the mental and the emotional. It's just an energy system, and it's all connected in ways that we're literally trained to believe the opposite of that. that this is discreetly over here in one bucket and this is over there in another bucket. And so, when you ask the question of me in the session, I make an answer, but then when you say, so what do you notice? When that happens, I start to feel physical sensations. And were there just two? I think there were just two broken bones in my past that came up in the session. I started to feel energy around where that injury was. And these injuries are 45 years ago or more. And so the value of being able to have someone like you guide a person into and through that connection without the judgment or without the labeling was really powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to point out that the fact that you had the experience of two instances of broken bones, that was the first time in my experience of over 1,000 sessions where someone had broken bone memories. And I would venture to say that it was no accident that they came up. They were relevant to the topic that we were addressing somehow, those instances. So people have all kinds of physical experiences, maybe just a crick in the neck that shows up, or energy in the belly, or where do you feel that behind my eyes, for example, so I think that one of the pieces of this magic is creating that somatic experience, creating the integration of mind, body, energy, emotion, that we are an energetic system. And as you said, you hit all my buzzwords. And as an energetic system, emotion is energy. And if it is ignored long enough, it will manifest physically in some way, shape, or form. Plus, when we have physical experiences like physical traumas, like a bone break or whatever, then there are emotions that become part of that physical manifestation as well. So it can last, it can stay for 40 some years, right? It's like our bodies are this remarkable repository of information and energy. And that's why it's so important to be able to move emotional energy through. One of my experiences, and maybe I hope I don't get hate mail or something as a result of this, but one of the things that I've noticed over years and years is a high correlation between cancer and anger. And I don't know if you've noticed that in your work with people, but I've noticed that there's like unresolved rage. And if you think about it, anger consumes us, right? And so, it's interesting to be recognizing that it is all of one, that it is all one system. And the reductionist idea of looking at the body as a machine, and then if this part doesn't work, if we just fix this part, then it'll fix the machine. Things don't really work that way.
Well, there's so much to say there. The love, medicine, and miracles. Lots of people have talked about a correlation between intense negative emotions and physical distress. If it's there long enough, it actually becomes physical dis-ease. There's also the idea that we're trained to believe that our thoughts are separate from our emotions, are separate from our body, etc. But if you observe children, you realize that's not true at all. When they see something that's new and get excited, there's an emotional intensity that goes right along with the experience of taking in the sights and sounds and smells, etc. So it makes really good sense to me that anytime I have an injury, whether it's, a sprained ankle or a broken jaw or whatever, in that moment, I am this energy system that has thoughts and emotions and the spiritual energy and the physical energy, and it's all being affected in that moment. It's not a surprise that even if I'm not consciously aware of an emotion in that moment, there is an emotion that's registered in the system and can be tapped into, as we had an experience, a few days ago, 45 years later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can think of that energy as frequency. You can think of emotion as an energetic frequency. Different emotions have different frequency patterns. I mean, it doesn't matter if you think of it that way or not, but I find it helpful, frankly, because what I see is that we, in our upbringing, we are in an environment that we're given all kinds of messaging. The way I see it is that we're tuned to a certain radio frequency, and we believe that that frequency is the reality. And I guess what this work does is kind of put the tuning dials back in your own hands in a way, and it releases that one station kind of radio into being able to have more range.
Well, and for me, there's also the benefit of practicing awareness at a different level. And, most of the time, I think it was Paramahansa Yogananda who said, there is no such thing as the unconscious. Consciousness is what you've lived through. There's part of it that you're willing to look at and part of it that you're not. And the part you're not willing to look at, we call the unconscious. Well, as I work with someone like you, and I'm comfortable, confident, trusting, and I'm trusting that, this is going to be safe, then when these things bubble up, because I've just been asked to notice them, rather than shying away or saying, or having the automatic shut off of that's part of my consciousness I don't want to look at, there's more willingness to see what's there. And as I see what's there, as you said, then I've got more access to it. And then I can tune into the frequency differently. I can let it flow through me differently. And my experience of it becomes more conscious and more under my control.
I think so. And I also think that what shifts is the pattern. So what I've noticed in this work, and it's super powerful to be aware of it, is that when we presence ourselves to a sensation, that sensation moves. Whether it's an emotion or a physical sensation, when we can be fully present to it, it's energetic. And when we can allow it without judgment, just being present to it, it dissipates. And I've seen that happen with myself, with pain, and with clients, with physical pain, with emotional pain, like I think in our culture, we are taught and conditioned to ignore our emotions, to deny our emotions, to deny physical pain, to tough it through, to push past it,
judge them,
to judge, to all of these things that create resistance to the movement of that energy.
And when you say that, it reminds me of Michael Singer, and he was talking about energy, and energy is always in motion. So when we try to stop energy, we label it or we deny it. All we're doing is holding it in place. It's still got to move. So it moves in a circle and it spins. And then other people say, well, then that's when it gets trapped or locked or stuck. And what you're talking about is if I bring my awareness and presence to it without the judgment, without the trying to push it away, it can flow. Yes. And then I don't know where it's going to go or what it's going to do, but it's not going to just keep spinning.
Exactly. So that's what I mean by allowing and presence, because in pure presence, I don't believe there's judgment at all. So even in the context of a session, for instance, we might find ourselves observing ourselves and then judging ourselves, and that arising in the course of a session is say, oh, okay, so you're recognizing judgment. Where do you feel that in your body? What does that feel like? What's happening is it's peeling off these layers of what I call overlays on our foundational self, our soul purpose, or what our fundamental being, that are conditioned over the course of our lives, whether through deliberate indoctrination or through experience. And then we develop these patterns. And so the tagline for my work, which I call core connection, is remembering who you really are. And what it's doing is releasing these overlays to create a greater experience of presence and freedom.
And the overlays, as you say that, to me, are the labels, the judgments, the personality traits that I say, oh, well, I'm Irish German. Of course, we do this, we do that. And I lock that in and I don't open it to questioning about, well, there's another,
all of that too.
There's another rapid transformation therapy, and the man used to say, watch your language. What happens with the tense in your language when you say, oh, I don't do that? What does that mean? That's past tense, present tense, future. What does that mean?
Right.
Well, I don't remember having done that. That's more accurate, right? But when I say I don't do that, or that's not me, or then I lock in my thought structure, which of course is part of the whole energy system we're talking about, emotions and thought and physiology. And I block a part of it. I literally lock it down with that judgment. And one of the things that was so obvious to me in the work with you is that it was just this fluid and nothing was locked down. It was just, okay, then what? And now what? And now what? And this fluid moving through, which helps first identify and then release some of those judgments as you hit them in a session.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm thinking about when we judge, there's a dynamic that we're creating ourselves as separate from ourselves. And so what's happening, like what you're talking about is talking about identities. And this is one of the reasons that people feel, this is one of the reasons that I work only with people who have done work, is because this work is about letting go of identities. You know, we can, and that can be very frightening. I've had people show up to sessions saying, I'm scared out of my mind. I don't know what's going to be on the other side of this, because here's who I think I am. And if we're working on that, who am I going to be on the other side? And it's so fascinating because always who you are on the other side is more of who you really are. It's not like, you know, the fear that comes into the conversation is the fear of not knowing, or the fear of the unknown, you know, and even if, so for instance, people will have a pattern of speaking really poorly to themselves to motivate themselves to do stuff, right? Like if I don't kick myself in the butt, I'm not going to do anything. And because there's an underlying belief that I'm lazy or I'm not good enough or something. And in the face of what if that were to change? What if you didn't do that anymore? There's like, oh my gosh, who would I be? Who would I be without that? I've done that all my life. That's who I am. Right.
And what I talk to people about with that is that I can't be afraid of the unknown unless I've projected something negative into it. Because who would I be? What if I become the most magnificent specimen of this, that, or the other thing ever? Then I get excited about letting go of the old and moving into the new.
Some people get frightened by being the most magnificent specimen too.
Because they're imagining loss and separation from their loved ones, not being able to connect with their family of origin. So I'm always aware that when I have a fear come up, it's false. One of the bottom line observations I have is if I have a negative thought about myself or somebody else that's active in my mind, or a negative emotion, I can instantly know three things. The first one is it's a lie or based on a falsehood. Number two is it's an old tape playing. It's not about what's going on in the present moment. And number three, if I take an action from that, I'm just going to make my situation worse. I can't improve my life situation by dumping negative emotions on, or acting from the space where the negative emotions would drive my perception and then behavior. So I'm thinking in terms of watching our time, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about, are there other aspects of the work or the way you want to put yourself out there as the therapist that we haven't even mentioned yet?
Well, first of all, I'm going to reject for myself the word therapist because I don't have any of this traditional credentials. Okay, so I won't call myself a therapist. I call myself a transformational coach. And the reason that I do that is because people think they know what coaching is, but it is transformational, the work that I do, and it's not limited just to the core connection work. How I would put myself out there is to be someone who is committed to helping people reconnect with their core being and to find their authentic expression in the world. And I have a lot of beliefs and ideas, and I entertain them as hypotheses, not as ultimate truths. But one of those beliefs is that we all came here to do something unique and special, and that we all have a purpose. And that's one of the things that drives me in the work that I do, is to support people in finding their way onto that path if they are not on it, and if they are on it, to support them in fulfilling it to the greatest capacity that they can. And it can be being creating a lovely family. It can be healing relationships with family. It can be doing something that changes the world. It's on whatever full spectrum our purpose can be. It doesn't have to look grand to the outside world, and it can. So yeah, I think that we all came here with a unique song to sing, and that our lives are much happier and fulfilled when we do that, and when we're in alignment with that. And I believe that this is a time in our history as humanity that we need people to be connecting with their soul mission and purpose now more than ever. That if we were all in alignment with that purpose and beingness, that the world would be a much different and a much better place.
Well, in each individual's lives will be more content, fulfilling. It's one of the things that if you talk to a functional medicine practitioner, they'll say, okay, we need food and we need water, we need sleep, but we also need a sense of purpose in life. We need a sense of community and connection to love. And so those things are every bit as valuable as the solid nutrients that we put in our lives in terms of their contribution to a whole life that's enjoyable.
It may be even more important than the solid nutrition, because that if we're committed to purpose, we may take care of ourselves in a very different way.
Yeah, in a way that just kind of flows from, letting the truth of life act on us rather than have us judging what it should be.
And the thing about the path of purpose, it's not for cowards. It is a hero's journey. It doesn't mean that life becomes instantly easy. It just means that it gives us a sense of meaning, and it gives us resilience that we would not otherwise have. And it gives us a North Star and a context by which we have the ability to rebound from the challenges of life.
And I just flashed on the story of Indra from Joseph Campbell, because you said the hero's journey and there's Joseph Campbell, and the association in my mind is the story of Indra, who was the king of the gods, and got overinflated and caused a problem, and then got deflated and caused a problem. And the thing is, just be you and live into what you're supposed to be. So, you may not be the person to send the next rocket up into space, but your existence, your interaction with your family and friends and the people at the checkout stand is an important part of this flow that we call life.
That's another really big foundational part of the work that I do, and that is recognizing our sufficiency. That we are, just by virtue of being, we are worthy. That our society is so focused and as we're so deeply indoctrinated to our worth being tied to what we do or what we own or our achievements, who we know, how much money we have, how many things we have. That is something that we have been taught to associate our value with. And it's just a lie. And as we come back to being able to be present and whole, we then have the ability to shift all the dynamics in the world that are taking us toward destruction. This constant need of more things, more technology, more better, but like more being better. More is not better. More is just more. And I think that like this is also a foundation of the work that I do, is as we come back to our own wholeness and our own deep sense of connection and purpose, then things in the world shift. The dynamic of the world shifts. If we're whole and worthy without anything extra that we need to prove ourselves, what would be different?
Everything.
It would. It would.
Yes. Excellent. 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 So how there'll be, ways people can look you up. One of them is what the website, Core Connection.
yourcoreconnection.com. Now, the thing is, I have a very small practice deliberately. I work with 10 or 12 people at a time. I have a 3-month cohort. So the next one is starting October 1st, and it'll go October, November, December. Then I take a month off, and then another 3-month cohort, theoretically. The way it works is I don't really want my work to be transactional. So what I do is I have a monthly fee, a session a week throughout the month. But if people need more than a session in a given week, we schedule additional work. I have a once a week group session for about a half hour where we celebrate our wins, and once a month, one of those sessions is a longer session where I do some kind of process. So that's how it works. And there's description of that on my website at yourcoreconnection.com. And I do it that way because, first off, I don't want to do one-off sessions. I really want to see people make massive transformation. And the people that my ideal clients are people that are doing big things in the world. And, because that gives me a way to multiply the influence, if that makes any sense. So.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate your sharing with us and being willing to give us another hour of your time. And I look forward to follow up. I'll give you some more feedback on our session from a few days ago. And I'm excited to find out how you train other people to do this. You talked about that multiplier factor. And so I'm framing a goal for you. You don't have to accept it, but I'm framing a goal for you to find a way to train other people to do this powerful work.
So I am really grateful to you for bringing that up, because this is really profoundly powerful work. It's the most powerful work I have found that to be reliably impactful. And that said, I've wanted to train people to do this work so that it wouldn't disappear with me. And I would want people to have an experience of the work in order to be trained into it. And that said, the people that are my clients aren't people that want to be therapists in big air quotes again, because of the credential thing. So I am open. I really would like to be able to share this work and have people be able to carry it on. And there are guiding principles for it, for sure. And I've thought for a long time about how I would train it. It's just having the audience to train.
Wonderful. Well, I'm sure the right people will hear this and reach out to you. And I look forward to following up and finding out how that's going.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Well, thanks for the time.
I appreciate this time and what you do in the world, and your really, really, really generous commitment to people.
Well, you're entirely welcome and deserving. And I will talk to you again before long with an update about our last session.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Mira Rubin is a transformational coach, visionary, and author. She is the host of 2 podcasts, Sustainability Now and The Core Connection. Mira is the originator of the Core Connection process, which is a unique synthesis of and evolution of multiple modalities, including neuro-linguistic programming, hypnosis, and applied kinesiology. The core connection work precipitates often miraculous shifts that result in expansive new opportunities and accomplishment, and an expanded experience of freedom and an empowered stewardship of life. Mira is passionate about connecting people to their core mission and purpose. Her personal mission is to use her voice and multiple projects to support the mainstreaming of sustainable practices globally. Currently, the primary vehicle for this work, the Sustainability Now podcast, shares hope and sustainability tools and practices related to food, energy, housing, waste, water, health, economics, consciousness, and more, with consciousness being the key. More about that at sustainabilitynow.global. The Core Connection video podcast airs live on the YouTube and Facebook channels of Enlightened World Network and addresses timely and timeless issues related to life, meaning, and being from a vantage point of expanded consciousness.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.